I first came across Five Nights at Freddy's in August of 2014. I was 11 years old, living in Poland. Back then I could barely speak English, so naturally most of my YouTube intake was in Polish. One night I stumbled onto a video from one of the biggest Polish YouTubers at the time, someone I won't name now due to later allegations. The video's title translated roughly to World's Scariest Game, and since I was already into gaming videos, I clicked. My little brain was terrified. I'd always had a fear of dolls or lifeless objects suddenly coming to life, and those animatronics? They hit that uncanny valley spot perfectly. But as scared as I was, I couldn't stop watching. There was something magnetic about it. Eventually, I even convinced a family member to buy the game for me. The security camera gameplay was unlike anything I'd seen before, and soon enough, I discovered what really hooked people, the mystery behind it all, hidden just beneath the surface. Looking back now, what's weird is how much the series aligned with big changes in my own life. By the time the fourth game was being teased, I had moved countries entirely. What started as a source of fear somehow evolved into a strange kind of comfort. For years, Five Nights at Freddy's sat in the back of my mind, not just as a scary game, but as something that grew up with me. So I decided to go back. In this video series, I played every mainline FNaF game, from the original to the Secret of the Mimic, and I completed them 100%. Some I knew well, others I'd never beaten before. Along the way I discovered just how much these games had changed, or maybe how much I had. What once terrified me as a kid now made me think, and what I expected to breeze through sometimes caught me off guard. This video is a reflection on fear, memory, and the strange comfort of returning to something that once haunted you. I've played most of the FNaF games before, but not all, and until now I'd only ever fully completed one of them. This time I wanted to go all in, to experience each game as fully as I could. For the ones I played back then, or watched others beat, I'll be comparing what I remember with how they make me feel now. For the games and DLCs I never finished, or never touched, I'll be looking at how they lived up to my expectation, and how they made me feel seeing them for the first time. Unlike other horror games where you move around or fight back, FNaF trapped you. And that made it feel way more real. You weren't a hero, you were just a night guard, waiting to die. The idea of being stuck in one place felt like such a fresh take on the genre, and this use of security cameras instantly grabbed my attention. From the very first video I saw, I knew what was coming. There was this unshakable sense of doom moving towards the player, and it was terrifying. Looking back, the jumpscares weren't what scared me most. As an 11-year-old, the whole game felt like a nightmare. What really got to me was the tension, not knowing when something would jump out, and the eerie feeling of the animatronics and the unnerving sound design. Before I had the game myself, I watched YouTubers play it. I was constantly on edge, but I wanted to experience it, or at least I thought I did. Eventually I convinced someone to get it for me, I loaded it up, and instantly I was too scared to play it properly. I'd either mute the sound completely or just slam the door shut and run out of power. I was terrified to immerse myself in the experience, and I don't think I ever made it past night 3. Mechanically, the game was simple. The controls were easy to understand, especially since I already knew the animatronics' behaviours from watching others play. I never felt like the game was unfair or frustrating, just overwhelming in how it made me feel. However, the fear that came with playing and watching the game made me even more hooked. The rush of adrenaline I would get was addictive. I discovered FNAF's hidden story not long after first encountering the game. The moment that really stood out for me was when the East Hall poster changed into newspaper clippings about the missing children. That caught my attention. Combined with the animatronics' almost human-like screams during jump scares, the creepy breathing before an attack when the cam is pulled up, and the strange language-like audio coming from Bonnie and Chica when in adjacent halls on later nights. Our phone guy mentioned the bite of 87.
They used to be allowed to walk around during the day too, but then there was the bite of 87. Yeah, it's amazing that the human body can live without the frontal lobe, you know?
It all felt connected. It was subtle, but it meant something. I also experienced Golden Freddy appearing in the office once, and after seeing more of it on YouTube, I needed to know what was going on. It's hard to remember exactly which theories I believed back then, especially since I followed the series on and off over the years. As everyone knows, the lore has only grown more complex with time. Back then, I was drawn to both the scares and the mystery. Once I realised there was something deeper, I binged whatever I could find about the hidden story. Since I only spoke Polish at the time, the content was limited, but that didn't stop me. A friend and I, who were both into the game, would try to come up with our own theories. Eventually, I ran out of videos in Polish and started watching English-speaking YouTubers, even though I didn't understand a word. That was actually the first time I came across Markiplier. The feelings I associate with the first FNaF game are mostly rooted in nostalgia. It was the first game in the franchise and the first I ever became a little obsessed with. Even if that obsession faded over time, it'll always be a part of me. As a kid, I didn't really see the game as something meant only for adults. There wasn't any graphic violence or gore, just tension, dread, and the fear of the unknown. I think I've always been drawn to that kind of psychological horror, even before I knew how to describe it. Revisiting the game now, even though I've played it on and off over the years, brings all that nostalgia back. This time though, I'm going into it with a different mindset. I really want to immerse myself and dissect the experience. I know it won't be nearly as terrifying as it was in 2014. Still, I get startled easily, so I wouldn't be surprised if it manages to catch me off guard. Once I booted up the game, I let myself sit with the main menu for a moment. I didn't feel any fear this time, mostly nostalgia, but I could still recognise why it had once felt so unnerving. That low, ambient drone still holds a kind of dread. It sets the mood perfectly. Not dramatic, just foreboding. There wasn't much tension at first. I remember that the animatronics don't begin to move until Phone Guy's first call finishes, so I used that time to immerse myself by checking the cameras and revisiting old Easter eggs.
Hello? Hello? I wanted to record a message for you to help you.
I looked for the newspaper clippings in the Nice Hall, which didn't show up, and eventually I triggered the backstage stairs, where the spare mascot heads and endoskeletons silently stare back at the camera. But as soon as the call ended, and all that was left was the game's raw audience, that's when the tension started.
Alright, good night.
I saw Bonnie make his first move. At one point I couldn't find him in any nearby cameras, which caused a brief flicker of panic, before I finally caught him moving down the West Hall. Foxy made a brief appearance, peeking out of Pirate Cove, and at one point when I checked the show stage, Freddy was staring directly into the camera. Subtle, but effective. Even though I knew what was coming, every trigger, every scare, it still worked. Not with the same intensity as in 2014, but enough to remind me why it had scared me so deeply back then. It had an atmosphere. It still does. This night was still fairly intense. Bonnie and Chica both visited frequently, and the first time Bonnie appeared at the door and I hit the light, that sharp stinger sound actually made me jump. I was playing with my volume maxed out, which definitely didn't help. Foxy even charged at the door. From the start of the night, I shifted to more of a minimal strategy, checked Foxy's camera, flicked the door lights, and nothing more. I managed power well, and I didn't feel overwhelmed. The tension started to dip. I got lucky with RNG, and Bonnie didn't show up until around 5 AM, and Foxy stayed behind the curtain all night. Chica visited a few times, but it was manageable. I did get hit with the "it's me" hallucination though, still surprisingly effective, as I did get a fright, even though I anticipated it coming. At this point, I could tell the animatronics were more aggressive. Freddy had entered the mix and was moving around frequently, but the tension wasn't really there anymore. I'd become comfortable, or maybe even desensitized. I stuck to the minimal strategy again, just checking Foxy's camera and using the lights. Foxy charged the doors 3 separate times. I ran out of power for the first time, but got lucky. While Freddy was playing his music outside the office, 6 AM hit just in time. Even when the lights went out, I wasn't scared, just focused on the outcome, waiting to see if I'd survive. By this point, most of the tension had worn off. It took me a few attempts to clear this night, mostly because I kept running out of power. There was one moment where Freddy managed to get into the office and caught me off guard. I actually jumped, which surprised me. But after the 3 failed attempts, fear gave way to frustration. Bonnie and Chica were lingering at the doors too long, draining the power. Foxy kept charging down the hall multiple times, piling on the pressure and wasting power. That said, most of mechanics that used to scare me now serve a practical purpose. The strange human-like sounds from Bonnie and Chica, once eerie, actually helped me track their position without needing the cameras. So I adjusted my strategy slightly, closing the right door before checking Pirate Cove if Freddy was nearby. On one run, I spotted a poster changing into a newspaper clipping. That brief glimpse sparked a wave of nostalgia. And I noticed something that I hadn't picked up on before, a strange, identifiable sound when Freddy was in the office. It's subtle, but it's definitely there. Let me know in the comments if you can hear it too. Is it Freddy? I eventually beat the night in a lucky finish. I ran out of power shortly after 5 AM. Foxy sprinted down the hall and initiated his jump scare, but before the animation completed, I lost power, which ended up saving the run. Freddy appeared, ready to kill, but 6 AM rolled over just in time. Even after 12 years, the game can still surprise me. Heading into Night 6, I wanted to approach things more methodically. I recalled a strategy I'd seen that involved keeping the camera fixed on 4B right outside the office, which prevents Freddy from advancing. I also remember that Foxy's attacks could be delayed just by keeping the camera up frequently, not necessarily focused on him. By now, any remaining tension had fully dissolved. I wasn't scared, I was executing, focused entirely on keeping a rhythm, managing resources and reacting quickly. At this point the horror had been replaced with the mechanics. I decided to implement this exact strategy, keep the camera on 4B and then alternate between checking the light and flipping the camera, and shut the doors quickly should Bonnie or Chica appear. It worked, I beat the night on my very first attempt. I went into the infamous 20-20-20-20 mode knowing I could beat it. I used the exact same strategy from night 6. On my first attempt I made it all the way to 5 AM, but Foxy slipped through and jumpscared me. It didn't shake me, again I wasn't scared, just frustrated by the misstep. On my second try, everything clicked. I kept pace with the rhythm, managed the power, and beat the hardest mode in the game. Three stars in the menu, fully legitimate. After all these years, I finally closed the book on FNaF 1. Not just with nostalgia, but with a real sense of mastery. Coming back to FNaF 1 after more than a decade, I was surprised by how faithful the experience still felt. The pacing, tension, and even the mechanics aligned closely with what I remembered. It didn't feel faster or slower, just familiar. One moment in particular brought back a vivid memory. I was frantically checking cameras trying to locate a missing animatronic, and instantly remembered doing the exact same thing as a kid back in 2014. Heart pounding. Despite all the years and changes in game and expectation, that feeling still hits. Because I've stayed up to date with the FNaF series, nothing here felt especially forgotten, but remembered differently. Yes, I had forgotten how efficient the game was at building dread with so little. The game's audio remains one of its most effective tools. Early on, the ambient hum of the fan and the distant footsteps created a familiar sense of unease. That classic stinger sound when an animatronic appears in the doorway got me almost every time in nights 1 through 5. However, I no longer felt the same dread I once did. I understand now that the sounds are cues, not scares. As a kid, they were terrifying. As an adult, they're more like signals in a well-designed system. The atmosphere is still eerie, but it no longer unsettles me the same way. Still, it's easy to see why the tension was so powerful back in the day. The controls now feel slightly clunky, especially compared to the later FNaF titles. The need to manually toggle lights off is a bit dated, and quickly moving from one side of the office to the other could be smoother. That said, the core loop of managing power and monitoring cameras retains its intensity, at least in the early nights. Losing track of an animatronic and desperately scanning the feed can spike your heart rate. I did lose a few times to Freddy's blackout jump scare before retaining my strategy. As the nights progressed, tension gave way to rhythm. After night 5 I adopted a known strategy, and from that point forward the game transformed from a horror into a timing and resource management challenge. It stopped being scary and started being satisfying, more strategic than terrifying. Each animatronics rules are fairly clear now. Bonnie and Chica overstaying at the doors remains both frustrating and power draining, while Foxy's recurring power attacks adds more of a technical challenge rather than a scare. Freddy's unpredictability still keeps you guessing, making him the most tension-inducing presence overall. I wouldn't say I ever felt genuinely afraid, not like in 2014. What I experienced this time was more of anticipation than fear. I got started a few times and there was brief moments of panic when I fell out of rhythm on later nights, but most of the fear was reflexive, earned more by clever pacing and tension than cheap tricks. Even though I wasn't scared in the traditional sense, I have a deeper appreciation now for how the game earns its moment. This time around, no new lore hints jumped out at me, but knowing the broader FNaF mythos didn't dampen the experience. If anything, the minimalistic design of the first game feels more haunting now. The absence of exposition makes the mystery stronger. There's something timeless about sitting alone in a dark office, in a dying pizzeria, with barely sketched horrors. That simplicity is a part of why this game succeeded in 2014, and still works today. Playing FNaF 1 again stirred up a lot of nostalgia. I was reminded of that childhood fear, when I couldn't even play a full night without quitting, and contrasted it with how calm and strategic I am now. Even when I felt on edge this time, it was with a sense of familiarity and comfort, not panic. It's strange and oddly satisfying to revisit something that once frightened me and come away with closure. Revisiting Five Nights at Freddy's in 2026 was both nostalgic and enlightening. What once felt like a horror gauntlet now plays like a tight, well-crafted strategy puzzle. The fear is gone, but in its place there's a deep appreciation. I see now just how smart the design really was. Minimal inputs, maximum impact. It's a masterclass in doing more with less. Most importantly, I got the closure I didn't know I needed. I beat the game legitimately and all the way through to 2020 mode, and it no longer looms over me. No jump scares, no nerves, just a quiet, earned respect. The game didn't change, I did. If you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe.